Should everyone go to college if there were no financial cost associated with it? That is, should everyone go to college if college were free? Well, this is obviously a more complicated question than it sounds like. Your initial thought might be, well, of course. College is valuable, education is valuable. If there's no cost to the student to attend college, of course they should go to college. But there's a few more considerations in it than that, and there's also some potential repercussions for society. Now, over the years, we've seen more and more people go to college, and obviously that has had an effect on society. Some positive attributes, some negative attributes as well, particularly in the system and how education fits into society. So, here's our first issue to address: the cost of going to college. Well, it's quite expensive. And in other videos, we've talked about this, that the financial costs, the opportunity costs that you give up together may outweigh the benefit that you get from college. And that's why many people follow a less expensive route to obtain some level of skills that they can use to translate into value and to make their way in this world, to have a profession. So oftentimes that may be manual labor or technical proficiency in a given field, but they forego the 4-year academic baccalaureate style education. Now, we've also discussed in other videos that the purpose of that 4-year baccalaureate style education, which is so liberal arts heavy in most institutions, is to create a well-rounded individual. That is, so individuals can interact more readily with diverse types of individuals within the workplace and thus ultimately be more effective in that regard. They can also draw upon the theory and exposure that they've had to think more broadly than just the means or method that they've learned to do something. They'll ask the questions of why should I do that? How should I do that? Things of that nature. So the quality of education in itself is important, but the value later is oftentimes immeasurable because, once again, it doesn't show up till later. So, with this premise in mind, should students go to college? Well, you still have to look at the cost, and there's still the opportunity cost there. If academic education is free, that is, no cost to the individual, there are still going to be costs there, particularly to the government who supports the institution. So let's look at it from this framework. First, the individual is foregoing years of work experience that they could otherwise acquire skills and pursue the profession that they desire. Now, they are gaining skills, that is the well-roundedness, the knowledge, and they can specialize in things that will give them access to a career that otherwise they wouldn't have. But what if their intention is never to go for a career that requires a college education? That is, the career they intend to follow focuses exclusively on the skill set that you have and the ability to do the job. Or it focuses primarily on the connections that you've made, the inroads into the industry. This is very true for many industries such as film, television, music industry, many of these entertainment style industries that are very closed in nature. That is, it's more important to make the connections and to develop the skills than it is to, once again, have a signaling function of a degree. So obviously that's a consideration for the student. But what are some of the considerations that we just mentioned to society? So we have more colleges and universities than ever. There's over 5,000 colleges and universities across the United States alone. And over 40% of individuals graduating high school are going on to these institutions. Now, they pay partially for the funding of these institutions. State schools are funded primarily by the state, and there are different revenue sources within any given state that fund these institutions. Some of the money comes from the federal government, some of the money comes from sales taxes, some of the money comes from taxes on things such as alcohol, tobacco, and lottery funding proceeds, things of that nature. And many states have used these types of proceeds effectively to fund their institutions. But if college were free to everyone, that is, you're removing one of those hurdles there, that is, the money that you have to pay to go there, you would likely have an increase in demand for the spots that are available. Now, if you were to try to accommodate everyone, the cost to society would be much higher because now you're accommodating a larger group of people and you're getting no support from the finances that they put into it. That is, they're not paying for the tuition. So once again, the cost to the state in funding those schools goes up a great deal. Now, of course, private schools would be a completely separate matter, and it would be very difficult to come up with a means or method that these private institutions could fund themselves fully and still remain free for students unless they have a large endowment that has been built up over many, many years of investment in the school, that is, donations to the school from alumni or other sponsors of the school. So we're talking primarily about institutions that receive at least some of their funding from the state. So these institutions will either have to change their operating model to reduce costs dramatically in order to accommodate all of these additional students and the lack of additional funding that they have, or the state would have to come up with a way to fund these institutions in their current practices with an increased number of students, which would far exceed the current amount of funding that goes to these institutions, which could be very difficult for less affluent states or more impoverished states to meet these funding needs. So let's assume for a second that you had to meet these funding needs with less resources. Does that mean the quality or benefits that you actually get from the educational experience go down? So the question becomes, would it be worth it to diminish the overall quality of educational institutions in order to accommodate everyone who shows an interest in going to college? And there may be an argument there that you only diminish the quality of some types of schools, not all of them. That is, some schools may continue to hold high academic prestige, and the top performing students would still end up at those colleges or universities. And even when the absence of resources, the quality of the student, their dedication to be there. And we've talked about this in other videos, that the quality of an educational academic program is largely based upon the quality of the students sitting beside you. That is, their dedication to learning the subject matter, their interest, their engagement, that type of thing. And you tend to see that in academic institutions that have higher academic standards for matriculation. So would you create, again, a class system among schools whereby a quality school, once again, is measured by how difficult it is to get into it in the state system as well, such that going to academic institutions at a lower tier that, say, admits everyone but doesn't have the resources to fully explore the educational opportunities or to fully fund the educational opportunities that they offer now, such as all the extracurricular activities, the clubs, the career development centers, things of that nature. So the question really becomes one of practicality. If everybody went to college, particularly even if they didn't have a full grasp or understanding of the value or what they expected to receive from the experience, would it be a good idea for the individual, and would it be a good idea for society to promote such things? Because in effect, going to college is a delay in one entering their chosen field of interest or choice. And no one can doubt that there is learning that takes place in the employment environment or simply doing the things that you do out in the world to sustain yourself. There's a constant learning there. Now, obviously, the learning is different. It's not an objective environment where you're simply presented with a lot of thought and ideas from diverse sources and diverse areas of thinking. But when it comes to adding economic value to society, there is a strong argument for an individual who understands or knows what they want to go into, following that path without going through the academic experience. So I suppose the point of this discussion is this. It may not be as obvious as it seems at first that if colleges or higher academic institutions were free, would it still be a good idea for everyone to go to college? That is, you still have to look at the other costs, the cost to the individual in the form of opportunity cost, and you have to look at the cost to society and what that could do overall to the education system and the fiscal impact that it could have on those who are charged with supporting the education system, that is generally state governments. I don't know what the answer is, so if you have an opinion on the matter, please jump down in the comments below. Go over to thebusinessprofessor.com, start a discussion in one of the forums. But regardless, I hope to see you around the platform soon. Until then, take care.